Hi, friends. Welcome back to What They Don't Say. It's your girl, Shannon here. And today I am going to be answering some of your guys' questions that you have written in either through email, the website submission, TikTok, social media DMs, comments, all of that. While answering these questions, I would like to note that I am not a professional. I'm not an attorney. I am not a mental health professional. I do not have any degree in psychology or anything like that. So when I'm answering these questions, it is strictly from somebody who has maybe had experience in this, whether through interviewing people or through my own experience or through some Google research. And so just remember that I am not an actual medical professional or anything like that, but I'm going to answer your questions to the very best of my ability. One little side note, kind of weird, silly thing that I probably don't necessarily need to acknowledge, but I'm going to, is that I have a clip that I'm about to play of me trying a beverage that was sent to me. And listen, you guys know, how I feel about drinking beverages during recording. I love it. I mean, who doesn't love a good beverage? Like right here, I have some coffee, I have some water, but this video clip that I'm going to play is from an episode that I ultimately chose not to upload. And I really wanted to try the product for you guys and give an honest review and also thank the company for sending them to me. And so when you see it, you'll be like, Shannon, you're wearing a completely different sweatshirt in that clip than you're wearing here. And that's because it's 9 a.m. and this drink is an alcoholic drink, and I'm not going to drink an alcoholic drink at 9 a.m. unless it's a very special occasion, and today is not one of those. So if you see that clip, that's what's going on there. It's not a glitch in the system. The beverage that I'm trying today is a spiked prebiotic soda called Pop Sips. They sent these to me. They sent me 2 flavors, which I believe they only have 2 right now, but they have raspberry rose, which is what I will be trying today, and then they have a lime one. I'm super excited. As you guys know, I'm a beverage girly. If you're watching this, you will see that this can is literally half the size of my face. It's the size of my palm. It's quite small, but it's 6% alcohol, and frankly, I don't really know what prebiotics necessarily do, but I think that I know. I'm pretty confident that they're related to stomach stuff. So I know that alcohol is bad for you. So maybe the prebiotics will kind of PEMDAS the bad away, if that makes sense. Also, this only has 90 calories and 1 gram of added sugar. So compared to a lot of other seltzers and stuff, that's pretty freaking good. Okay, let's give it a sip. Wow. Okay, that's actually freaking gas. It really does kind of taste like some sort of kombucha-y-esque. There's the slightest hint of alcohol. It's fairly sweet, sweeter than I thought it would be. I like that. Okay, well, cheers. I hope that you guys have a fun beverage that you're consuming with me. Thank you to everybody who wrote questions in. I'm really excited to answer them, and let's get into it. The first question is, what counts as sexual assault? Where's the line, and what about gray areas? This is a great question, and I think that I was originally surprised by how often we got this question, but I do believe that it really goes to show how much we really don't know what sexual assault is. It is really not clearly lined out for us. My core message is that if there is not consent, it is sexual assault. Consent is something that needs to be given openly and freely. And if you are intoxicated or you are, for some reason, unable to consent, that means that there is not consent there. And I think it's really well phrased when people say that consent is not the absence of a no, but a presence of a yes. So at the most basic form, sexual assault is when there is not consent present. And when I say present, I mean that it doesn't mean that there is an absence of a no. It means that there is a presence of a yes, a willingness to participate in this. I would go even further to say that when you're having physical intimacy with somebody, it should be something that both participants are willing and wanting to do. So it's not just, yeah, I'll do that. It's, yeah, I would love to do that. I really would like to do that. I want to do that with you specifically. And I want to do this, this, and this. And so it's even beyond this idea of just you have general consent. It's that consent is something further. Consent is a want and a desire to participate in physical intimacy. So therefore, sexual assault would be the opposite of that. I'm assuming that the part of your question where you're mentioning gray areas, you're referring to things such as coercion, intoxication, using power or authority, when there's a power imbalance. Stealthing. Stealthing is something that I don't think people really talk about. So just as a brief overview, stealthing is basically when you agree to have sex with somebody using a condom and then the person takes the condom off without you knowing or lies about putting one on. And so that's also a part of consent, is that consent isn't just an overall blanket for anybody to do anything anything to you physically. Consent is something that can be removed at any time, and it is also something that has to be given along the way. Like, think about it as like each kind of physical intimacy is almost like there's like a little gate. Like, you have to have the key to get through that gate, and consent acts like that key. So just as a little side note, part of physical intimacy and making sure you have consent is having conversations around birth control and condom usage and things like that. It's not just like, yeah, sex, like that's automatically there. Like, there's a lot of different pieces and nuances to it. Where were we? Oh, yes, stealthing. So yes, these sort of gray areas that might take place. And all of these areas I think are considered gray because there's more complexity or nuance to them. But at the end of the day, like if somebody has asked you over and over and over again to have sex and you just eventually kind of like give in, you're like, okay, fine, whatever, I'll just do it. That's coercion. That's not consent. If you are afraid that somebody will harm you if you don't have sex with them or do any physically intimate acts with them, that's coercion. That's not consent. If you are too intoxicated to talk or make decisions, that's not consent. Anybody like joking and touching you in ways that you never said was okay, there's no consent there. That's assault. So these areas that I think are more gray are actually areas that society has just sort of deemed as confusing, and they have used these sort of gray areas to confuse people who have been sexually assaulted and blame them for what happened. So, if you were too intoxicated to consent, people don't say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that somebody did that to you. You were too intoxicated to consent. People say things like, oh, well, you were drinking? Like, what did you expect to happen? And so these sort of gray areas are the exact areas that I think society uses to confuse victims and blame victims. And so I think that's why they become gray, when the reality is none of those situations, like getting my words all doubled up. In any of those situations, consent is not present. So those gray areas are actually a little bit more black and white. One more side note on this, every state and country has different definitions of what sexual assault is. Like, it really does vary state by state. If you want to know your exact laws of sexual assault and rape in your state, go to RAIN's state law database. It will be linked in the show notes down below, and you can go state by state and it'll lay out all the definitions, what the punishments or potential punishments would be for each of those crimes. So it really lays it out super clearly. And not only does it vary state by state, it also varies via, like, if you're going through a military court process versus a civil process. In my case, I went through a military court process. And so during my impact statement, I was not allowed to call what happened to me rape, even though I consider it to be rape. I had to call it sexual assault because this specific legal system did not qualify what happened to me as rape. Their definition of rape required a certain level of like physical force. And so I experienced sexual assault, but not rape. So in my impact statement, I couldn't call it rape because they considered it to be sexual assault. So yes, if you want to learn the laws in your state and figure out the definitions in your state, check out that RAIN link down below. Next question. Could you give an overview of the trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn? Yes, I would be happy to. So at the core, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn are all trauma responses, and they are automatic survival responses, and none of them are necessarily like better or worse than the other ones. They are simply just ways that your body responds to moments of high stress, trauma, and fear. So just to like start there, that's the baseline. There is no trauma response that is better or worse than one another. They're all kind of like level playing field, okay? Because of these trauma responses are completely automatic and you don't get to consciously choose which response you have, it's really important that you're not upset at yourself for having one trauma response or the other, because you actually don't even get a choice in them. So I just suggest that you don't harp on yourself for being mad that you didn't have one trauma response instead of another, if that makes sense. And like I mentioned earlier, each of these responses are triggered by fear, trauma, high amounts of stress, feelings of unsafety. Those are all potential things that could trigger these. I'm going to be reading some of these definitions for each of them from health.com because I want to do my best to not give you guys any misinformation. Fight, the fight response. When your fight response becomes activated, your instinct is to cope with the perceived threat aggressively. This response can physically affect your body by causing higher blood pressure, increased heart rate, and a rush of adrenaline. Your body is choosing to handle the situation via aggression. And with that extra adrenaline, it might do things like you might punch them, you might kick them, you might sort of fight back in a way. The next one, flight. A flight response triggers the urge to run away from the threat to try to save yourself. Similar to the fight mode, a flight response can lead to a rush of adrenaline and increased heart rate as your body prepares to quote unquote run away. Common side. So this was really interesting. This next part was interesting to me because I think that we think that flight is automatically just like running away from the situation, but this kind of highlights that it can look slightly different. So common sides of flight response include avoiding perceived or real threats, feeling trapped or as if the room is closing in on you, fidgeting or having trouble being still, panicking, the urge to flee a situation. And so it seems like the flight response is more than just the actual act of leaving. There's a lot that sort of seems to lead up into it, that sort of internal panic and things like that, and feeling like you need to leave the situation. Freeze. Freeze is a trauma response that I think many sexual assault victims can relate to. I'm not saying that every single one of them, but I think from what I've heard from professionals in this space and people who study freeze and know a lot about it, it is one of the most common responses to sexual assault. So, freeze, the definition of it is, while fight and flight are both active stress responses that increase the biological activity in your body, freezing is your body's way of shutting down. For example, freezing is very similar to the way that animals play dead when they're being hunted or in very dangerous situations. If you remember, our first guest episode was with a man named Brent Patrick, and they talked about how they have therapy bunnies in their office because bunnies, if you scare them, they will just freeze and they won't do anything. And people are just the same. When we feel like we cannot fight back or flee from the situation, our bodies freeze. That's our body saying, this is the best route for us to survive. Our bodies turn to the option of freeze when fighting and leaving is not an option. The freeze response affects your body by causing the following symptoms: decreased heart rate, dissociation, feeling detached from yourself and your environment, immobility or feeling like you can't move your arms or legs, numbness in your body. And freezing was what I experienced during my sexual assault. I vividly remember feeling like I couldn't move. I felt like a brick of concrete, like I was just stuck there. During my sexual assault, I was staring at the place where the wall met the ceiling. And I just remember being like, that was where I was living that's where my brain was trying to live while what was happening to me was so painful and horrible. And so I think it's really fascinating that the body is like either incredibly increasing your heart rate and your adrenaline to try to like get you physically out of the situation, or if it can't do that, it's decreasing your heart rate and helping you disconnect from the experience so that you can get through it. I think that is fascinating. And if that doesn't go to show how good your body is at protecting yourself, girl, I don't know what does. The last one is fawning. And fawning is a more unrecognized trauma response. It's not talked about very much. And I also think it is very common to experience during sexual assault. So the definition of fawning, according to health.com, is that when it feels safer to be submissive and obedient rather than fight or flee, people may turn to the fawn stress response. Most similar to the freeze response, fawning causes someone to please and appease the needs of somebody else instead of prioritizing their own well-being. So an example of this is sort of leading up to my sexual assault. There was a lot of moments with my perpetrator where he said things that made me uncomfortable, that sort of like raised a little bit of like oh, that's not good, thought in my head. But he was much bigger, much stronger than me. And I didn't want to, make the situation uncomfortable, even though he was making me uncomfortable. And so I would just kind of like laugh it off or just kind of like make some sort of comment back and just to sort of mellow the situation. And even the way that I said no to my perpetrator, I said, no, we're not doing this. Like, no, we're not doing this. At one point, I even said, I know you might think this is a joke, but I don't want to do this. We're not doing this. And so somebody who doesn't know about trauma responses might think that you would just say, no, stop. But when you're fawning and when you're afraid of setting a firm boundary because you don't know what might happen next and you're worried that what might happen next could be them harming you, you resort to something that is sort of downplaying everything to try to keep the peace in the situation to prevent you potentially being harmed by them. And so fawning can also look like sort of just going along with it without saying anything because you're worried that if you ask them to stop, that they might hurt you. It can also look like things such as being a people pleaser, doing what you're told no matter what, having a hard time saying no, not being able to set boundaries, or pretending to agree with somebody even when you really disagree with them. Yes, so those are the overviews of fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. Just remember that with all of those, it is your body choosing them. You don't get a choice in that. And any trauma response is completely valid. Your body did everything it could to survive. And that is something to thank your body for. Say, hey, body, I'm so grateful that you're still here. Next question. How do I cope with dissociation? Such a good question. I would like to start by saying that there is a difference between coping with something and healing and moving through something. For example, to me, dissociating really makes me feel like I have one foot in the world and one foot out. And that is a very uncomfortable space to be. I often also describe it as like I'm living behind a pane of glass when I'm dissociating. And so, right after my assault, when I was dissociating very, very heavily, I was coping. I was not moving through anything. I was coping. And the way that I coped is not a healthy way. So I'm not telling you to do this. I'm just sharing an experience. I coped through substances. I really felt like if I was going to be halfway in the world and halfway out, I would rather just be like fully one direction. And since I couldn't figure out how to get myself back into the world, I was like, I'm just going to take myself out of the world. And so, I did a lot of drinking. I smoked a fair amount of weed. And like, I didn't even like smoking weed. To this day, I don't like smoking weed. But back then, it was just this thing of like, okay, well, I can just do it. And then at least I'm not halfway in, halfway out. At least I'm just kind of like fully out in one direction. That's not a way that I recommend doing that. But that's one way that I used to cope with it. Then I learned a few more skills about like actually working through dissociation. So I learned that at its core, dissociating is a nervous system defense. It's your body basically saying, I can't really handle everything that's going on right now. So I'm just going to kind of like put a glaze over it, a little bit of film to protect myself while I'm still working through some things on the inside. But there are some tools and some things that you can do to actually help yourself work through dissociation and things like that. Like I expressed before, I'm not a medical professional, but these are just some things that helped me. And I think they can help you too. These things might sound kind of silly to you, but truly they can be helpful. So give them a shot. Don't knock them till you try them. The most basic one, and I think that this is one that a lot of people learn, is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding technique. So it's basically like look around, notice 5 things that you see, notice 4 things that you smell, 3 things that you can touch, like things like that, like literally going through each of your senses and noticing what they are noticing can be really helpful, because when you're dissociating, your body has no idea what the hell is going on around you. Like you are in a completely different universe. And so reminding your body of the things that are around you can be really helpful. Another thing sort of in that realm is doing little checks throughout the day just to like remind yourself of like where you are, like kind of tiny little checks. And so you can do that grounding technique. You can do that kind of whenever you want. You don't even have to say anything out loud, but maybe even set like calendar alarms or little reminders or actual alarms on your phone clock or something to like press your feet into the floor, like doing something physical that's like, okay, like wiggle your fingers, touch each finger to your thumb, even hum a line of a song, like all of those things, like doing something that is very active to take a body part and do something with it, I think can also be really helpful. For myself, one of the most significantly helpful things was working out. And girl, I know that when you're down in the toilet and you're dissociating, getting yourself to move can be really, really challenging. And it's not always necessarily something that you can get yourself to do because, life might be really hard right now. But if you are able to somehow go to a gym or take a workout class or go on a run with a friend or go on a high intense walk, I would really highly recommend that. Not only is it good from like an endorphins and dopamine standpoint, but it is literally just an activity that like forced my body into being really present in the moment, especially when it was a more challenging activity. Like I've mentioned before that I took up boxing. Boxing was something that was really technical, but also physically exhausting. So I had to be really present in that. It didn't necessarily mean that I would stop dissociating during working out, but it did mean that I was more present in an activity, which I think can kind of help your body to like get back into itself. So if you're dissociating, I'm really sorry. That's actually like one of my least favorite life experiences, but just know that dissociating is temporary. You can move through it and give some of these techniques a shot. I love you. This too shall pass. I don't say that sarcastically. I feel like I'm like with my words today, guys. I don't know what it is. Lack of sleep, too much coffee, maybe both. Who really knows? Okay, this next question was actually two separate questions from two separate listeners, but I just kind of like, I'm just going to put them into one. The first one is, Hi, hello back. I'm finishing a course of talking therapy and I've been referred for EMDR. Could you explain the different types of therapy for sexual assault and what you think are good, bad, and in between? Question mark. And the other question is, what was your therapy journey? I would just like to start by saying that I think it's really great that you are in therapy and that you are, like pursuing new kinds of therapy. That's like one of the hardest things. It is so hard to find a therapist that you like. And on top of that, it's really hard to be open and willing to try new kinds of therapy. I know it can be really scary. So I just want to start by saying kudos to you for doing that. Way to freaking go. I'm not qualified to tell you all the different kinds of therapy, and I've really only done a couple kinds of therapy. I have done, like basic talk therapy. I have done EMDR, and then I've done some like neuro brain things. I know, very, very scientific term. There are so many different kinds of therapy out there. And even though I am unable to go through all of them and tell you exactly what's right or good or bad, therapy is different for everybody. And what works for one person is not going to work for another. Be mindful of that before necessarily like jumping into a new kind of therapy. Do some research, talk to people who have experienced it. Like, Reddit is not always the best place for information, but maybe there's like a Reddit thread where people who have been sexually assaulted have done a certain type of therapy. So like maybe you can do some research on there as well. Talk to your therapist about what it would really look like to go through one of these types of therapies before doing it. Like really understand the layout of the land. You don't have to just jump right into doing a new kind of therapy. Like you can spend a little bit of time to think on it. What I would encourage you though is not to just not do it. Don't just say like, yeah, I'll think about it and then like not do it just because you're not sure about it. Like really spend intentional time thinking and learning and researching and asking questions before just shooting something down. And it's also important to note, just because one kind of therapy is scary, it doesn't necessarily mean that that new approach will not benefit you in some really big way. A kind of therapy that I have not done before that I think would be really interesting is doing group therapy and sort of like peer support therapy, like going to support groups. I think could be really beneficial. Once again, like I said, I've never done any of these, but I have heard about a few recently, and I do believe that local crisis centers can also direct you to the places where they have like peer support groups and things like that. So I would definitely check those out. I think it would be specifically really helpful after you've been assaulted to be able to be with other people who are in a similar place to you at the moment. This way you can sort of learn more about, is what I'm experiencing natural? And you can have conversations with other people and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I am feeling that right now too. Or, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And, just being in conversation with people who are in a similar place, I think can be helpful. However, although I am intrigued and interested and do think that group therapy and peer support would be a very good thing, it is not a replacement for one-on-one therapy. Okay. EMDR therapy. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Quite the mouthful. And every therapist does EMDR differently. That is the one therapy that I have done extensively. I have done so much EMDR therapy. I've done it with 3 different therapists now. The basics of it is that my understanding is that it was developed originally for people with PTSD, like war veterans and things like that. And it's to help your brain sort of process traumatic memories. Each of my therapists have done EMDR very, very differently. I do think that each one has a different approach. And there are also different little tools that they use to help you do the EMDR therapy itself. So this might sound kind of strange, but bear with me. One of them is that you will have a sort of long linear light that will go back and forth, and you will be doing the EMDR therapy while staring at this light going back and forth. Another one are little vibrating hand paddles that you hold in your hand and they vibrate back and forth. That's the one I've done the most. And then I also believe that there is a sound one that you can do too, which I've never done that one before. But EMDR is quite literally probably the most effective therapy that I've experienced It has also been the most emotionally draining therapy that I've experienced. EMDR typically involves you having to go back through the actual trauma, or maybe you're going through the thoughts around the trauma. I've never been in a plane crash, but I recently have been afraid of flying. And so I've been like walking through like the process of flying using EMDR and things like that. When I say that EMDR is draining, I mean that it's draining because you are having to basically relive what you went through, but you are working through processing it. Like you are working through your body digesting what you have gone through. So on the other side, you will be better for it. Like you will see benefits from it. I do believe, even though therapy is different for everyone, like it's a hard thing, it's an emotional thing, it's a draining thing, but the long-term positive impact is bigger than the like short-term not super warm and fluffy experience. As an example, after I do EMDR therapy, I usually need like a couple hours to kind of just do my own thing. Like I usually feel a little bit weird. Sometimes I feel completely fine. Other days I just kind of feel like a little bit more drained than normal. So, just be mindful of that. If you're going into EMDR therapy, I think that you should just really be prepared to sort of like have some time to be kind to yourself while going through it. My therapy journey, I'm going to give like the briefest overview. I've been in therapy since I was 12 years old. I'm 24 now. Yeah, there's only been like a couple years in there that were kind of off and on. I've had 3 major therapists in my life, one when I was a child, one when I was a teenager, and then one that is new in the last couple months. Shout out to my girl. Thank you for helping me through my trauma. I did do EMDR for my sexual assault, but I did not do it until after my trial was over. At the time, my therapist said that she felt that it would be best to wait for me to be, no longer going through court. And I don't really remember if she had specifically said that it was because she wanted my memories to be more fresh, but it was like something along those lines. My current therapist says that that was not good, that it would have been better for me to actually do EMDR earlier, but, I don't know anything. I'm just a follower. So alas, I have done EMDR specifically on like the sexual assault itself. And more recently, I'm going to begin doing EMDR, or coming up here, I'm going to be doing EMDR on like the court trial itself. So I think that that will be a really interesting experience. Yeah, I've had a lot of therapy in my life. There's a lot more details that I could put in there. For the sake of breadth, we'll just say that EMDR is by far my favorite form of therapy for actual long-term positive impacts, but it is my least favorite form of therapy because it is the most emotionally draining. Like the other day, I was just thinking like I was seriously mentally preparing for EMDR. I was like preparing my room for when I came back to be sad. I was making sure I was wearing comfy clothes. I was a little bit nervous. And I forgot something really important that my new therapist has been had talked to me about is that your therapist can help you do basically like little grounding activities to check in on yourself before you leave their office, but after EMDR. That way you're not just going into the world in absolute freaking shambles. Like that way you're not crying in the middle of EMDR therapy and then your therapist is like, okay, bye now. Ask your therapist if they can do any sort of like grounding techniques or, like guide you through some sort of meditation situation to, do a body scan, check how your body is feeling. Ask your therapist if they can do that before you go into the world after an intense session of EMDR or any other kind of therapy you're doing. Whew, that was kind of a long one. I hope that that answered your question. And I'm really glad that you're pursuing therapy. The last question is, I want to date again after years of not and being sexually assaulted. Do you have advice for trusting men and wanting to date? Yes, this is a scary place to be. Putting yourself out there after having a sexual assault experience and like not talking to men for years or not going on dates with men is really, really hard and scary. It's important to note that there is no deadline for readiness for dating again after sexual assault. I know it can be really hard, especially when family members are saying things like, oh my gosh, do you have a boyfriend? Or when are you thinking you're going to be married? Like, I want grandkids, when there's all of that pressure from outside people to sort of push yourself to go back into the dating world when you might not be ready. And so this is your reminder that there is no deadline of readiness for dating again after sexual assault. You're allowed to give yourself as much time as you need. And I would also argue that it's really important for the men that you're going to be going on dates with that you feel ready to be there. And you might not be able to feel ready until you're actually on the dates. Like, I've had people in my life who have gone on dates after being sexually assaulted and they like thought they were ready, and they had to go on a date to realize, holy crap, I'm not ready. I don't feel good around men at all. I don't feel safe. But it's important that when you're going into dating men after being sexually assaulted, that you really do feel ready. Be fair to yourself and the people that you're going on dates on by doing the legwork to heal and feel like you're in a better place before going on these dates. If you start dating people out of trauma, I promise you, you are not going to make good decisions. That's something that I saw a lot with my dating life after being sexually assaulted. I was a serial dater. I would just go on dates with men to try to like control them basically. Like, I just wanted to go on the date and leave the date feeling like I had control of the situation. I asked all of the questions. I like knew exactly what I was doing, but I had no actual interest in a long-term relationship with them. On the side of that, I had a really unhealthy attachment to a guy that I had no business being attached to. And so just do yourself and the people that you're going to date a favor by making sure that you are actually in a better headspace before going on the dates. With that being said, if you are feeling a little bit more healed and you're saying, okay, I'm self, I'm ready to go on some dates, here is some of my advice. Overall, dating after trauma is something that needs to take place in like small increments and having lots of safety checks and self-compassion. This is not like a pass-fail sort of situation. The first thing is you want to start off slow. Don't start by going over to somebody's house for them to cook you dinner on the first date. Do a lot of low stakes dates. Dates like coffee, a daytime outside activity around lots of people. Go to spaces where it's easier to leave if you're uncomfortable. Like, coffee is such a good one because you can just slam your coffee and be like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot I have this thing to do for work. I have to go. You're not sucked into doing like a whole 5-course meal with like 57 cocktails. None of that is involved. So start with low stakes dates. The next one is something that I'm sure a lot of women have done when going on dates, like with strangers or people from dating apps. But regardless of your gender, you should be having a safety habit in place. And the safety habit is just having a friend to check in with during the date. Even if the date is going well, you should still be checking in with that friend. And this is also a thing of like texting your friend when you get home and when you leave and things like that. So set up somebody who is like your designated safe people, or a group chat. That way, like, you can send one text in a group chat and everybody can be clued into how it's going. And set this up before the date. Another thing that you should set up before the date is making sure that you have a plan to leave. And I actually would recommend having like legitimately making plans for after the date. That way you have a firm timestamp of when the date will end, so that if you don't feel like you are able to say that you want to leave, if you're uncomfortable, you will actually have actual plans afterwards, so that will naturally create a window for you to leave. You might be thinking, oh, but what if the date is going well? Like, I'm not going to want to leave and like go to those plans. It doesn't really matter. If the date is going well, then that means you're probably going to see them again. So just leave, follow through on those other plans. And like I said, set those plans up before you go on the date, and tell the person before you're going on the date, hey, like, I'm really looking forward to having coffee with you. I just want to let you know that at 1 o'clock, I'm meeting up with a friend to go on a walk. So we just have to make sure that I leave by 12:45 or something like that. Just set that up. Now, if you feel like you are afraid to leave the date, but you want to leave, here are a few excuses or reasons to leave. I'm pet sitting for a friend and I realized I didn't feed the dog today. I have to finish an assignment that's due at midnight tonight. I have a really big social day tomorrow, and so I just need some alone time before that. My tummy hurts, and I think I'm going to shit my pants. My friend's tummy hurts, and she said that she shit her pants. It's my mother's birthday, and I have to call her. I'm not a huge proponent of lying, but these are just a couple things that I think could help get you out of that situation. Intuition and data. After sexual assault, when you're going on dates, you might be thinking, you might be having a hard time trusting yourself, trusting other people. Like, there's a whole lot of trust issues taking place. And so just remember that like your gut really does know best. Pay attention to your gut. Notice how somebody responds when you set a small boundary. And I actually recommend kind of putting in like very specific little boundaries along the way, or things that gives them the opportunity to show you who they are. Little tests, if you will. or even sharing a little bit of trauma, seeing how they respond to it, just a little bit. You're not bearing your soul, just a little bit. Little tests to see how they respond can help you and your intuition feel out this person and who they are and how you feel around them. So, for example, a boundary that you could set is just say, hey, I don't kiss people on the first date. Like, I just want to let you know up front, I don't kiss people on the first date, no matter how good the date is. And so just letting you know. And if they say something like, oh, why not? Like, I want to kiss you, blah, 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 something like that, then you're going to know, red flag, don't like this person, boo. If someone says, great, I just want to have a good time with you. Like, it's really important to me that you feel safe and comfortable. If you don't want to kiss, that's totally cool with me. Green flag, ring-a-ling-ling, we like that. Another thing, you could bring a friend early on. I'm not necessarily saying you have to bring them to the first date, although going on like kind of group chill, like, hey, we are all going bowling together. If you would like to come there, like seeing how somebody treats the people around you is a big telltale of who they are. Same with like the waiter. If they're really mean to the waiter, we all know that. That's like, right? We know that, right, guys? Like the biggest red flag is if somebody is rude to a waiter at a restaurant. We know that, right? Next thing is pace yourself. Limit the number of dates that you're going on every week or every month. Prioritize recovery time after a date. You don't really know how you're going to react when going back into the dating world. Even if you are in like a pretty good place from like a healing standpoint, you cannot really predict how you're going to feel. So it's important that you plan ahead and give yourself the time. Like, okay, I'm going on a date this week. I'm supposed to also do this like big social outing the next day. Maybe I will just sort of plan on going to that for like 1 hour instead of the whole thing. Or I'm going on a date this week. I'm going to give myself 2 weeks before I go on another date with this guy or with another guy. Like just giving myself some time to go on the date. It might be uncomfortable and a little bit scary and nerve-wracking, but then I can come home and know that I have time before going and having any pressure to do anything else. I thought it would be fun to end this question by going through a list of like green flags and red flags on a date. Yes, so we're just gonna go through them. Green flags. They don't rush you to tell anything about yourself. I'm not saying that they're not asking you questions. You definitely want them to ask you questions, but they're not pushing super hard on those questions. And this kind of goes into my next green flag, which is they are really good at paying attention to physical or verbal limits. So if you are standing near them and you slightly move back, rather than them moving forward and closer to you, they just kind of let you step back. And, this is not everybody is very aware of physical cues. Like some people don't have good spatial awareness. Like for example, my mom always stands really close to me and I'm like, hey girl, I've got a personal bubble. Like she's not trying to be rude, but just if I think it's a particularly good green flag, if somebody is really aware of your physical and like emotional space that you are asking for without actually having to say it. Sort of back on this like boundary setting idea. Another boundary that you could set is driving yourself, just saying like, hey, I'm going to drive myself to this date. Thank you so much for offering, but I have somewhere to be afterwards, or I just typically don't let somebody drive me on the first date or the second date or third date or whatever. See how they respond to that boundary. And if they respond well, green flag, ding, ding. This is less of a green flag and more of a reminder. You don't owe anybody anything after a date, after they paid for your dinner, after you had a coffee with them. And I think it can be really hard, especially for people like us people pleasers and, everything like that. And we don't want to like scare anybody away it's really important to remember that like them paying for your dinner does not mean that you owe them anything physically. It does not mean you owe them a text back. You don't owe them anything. Like until you are fully committed to somebody, and I'm saying fully committed as in you have both had that conversation, you don't owe them anything. You don't owe them exclusivity. You don't owe them a second date. And so just remember that when you're going on these dates, like you don't owe them a text back right away. You don't owe them anything. And so really focusing on what's going to make you comfortable and what you need for your safety to go back into dating, prioritizing that over them. Like it's okay to be selfish when going back into dating after sexual assault. Another green flag, if they call their mother, their sister, their grandma, any of the women in their life, specifically if we're talking about men, I think that that's a green flag. In fact, that used to be a question that I would ask men on the first date. I'm not sure if I would recommend this, but I would ask them something like, when was the last time you called your mom? Talk to me about that. And if they were like, whoa, weird question, I would think, they definitely don't talk to their mom. And so I always kind of liked that one. Once again, that's not for everybody, but I just think it's a green flag if somebody talks to their mom or their grandma a lot. Not like a mama's boy, as in they can't make any life decisions without their mom, but if they just say like, yeah, I call my mom a couple times a week or once a week or whatever, I think that that's a green flag. Red flags now. If anybody is pressuring you via text for not responding, this is actually probably one of my biggest icks. When someone is like, why haven't you been responding? Or I texted you 3 hours ago. Hello, question mark, question mark, question mark. Red flag. It means that if they're early on doing this, especially, you need to frickin' run because you don't know anybody anything. And if they think that they deserve a text back because they bought you a $6 coffee, you need to tell them to kick rocks. Next one. Any sort of pressure for drinking or anything physically intimate. If you're done drinking for the night and you're like, oh, and they say, hey, do you want something else to drink? And you say, no, I'm good. And they say something like, come on, just one more drink won't hurt. Or, you'll be fine at work tomorrow if you just have one more. Like, you're no fun. Have another one. Boo. Red flag. Hate that. If you're not respecting my drinking boundaries, you can go the fuck home. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Another one, sort of like sexual boundaries. If somebody's like repetitively being touchy and you're kind of pushing them away and they keep being touchy, bad, red flag, boo. Or if you are, let's say, you go home with somebody and things are getting a little hot and heavy, but then you say something like, hey, I am not comfortable doing anything with our clothes off. And then they keep, like lightly pulling your pants down or sort of reaching for the back of your bra. Boo, red flag, not good. When somebody's saying that every single one of their exes has been crazy, exes can be crazy. I've had some unhealthy exes, but if somebody's saying that every single one of their exes has been unhealthy and the crazy one and, all outlandish stuff, odds are that they were probably doing something in that relationship to make the other person go crazy. So just, red flag. At the end of the day, let's just shorten this up because I literally don't know how to do anything short and I am long-winded. Trust your gut. I know it's hard right now, but if you feel anything, just go with it. Like, spend the first couple weeks of dating really just going with your gut. If you feel like you need to leave, leave. If you don't feel like you should go, don't go. And I think that you will know the difference between not going because you're just generally have like butterflies, the butterflies that you kind of need to get in order inside of your tummy, versus, oh, I feel like a deep gut feeling of unsafeness and like this person might not be healthy or good and they might be toxic. Those are two different things. And so just spend some time listening to your gut and see how that goes. See how it feels to really listen to yourself. And that can help you sort of gain some trust with yourself back. And take notes of these good or bad patterns. If you set a boundary and somebody really respected that boundary, tell your friends about it. Send it in a group chat. That way you remember like, okay, this was a good pattern or this was a bad pattern or they did something that made me uncomfortable. Take note of these patterns. They mean something. People on dates are showing you who they are, and they might, everybody goes on dates and puts their best foot forward. You always want the other person to like you and things like that. But at their core, the way that people react to the things that you do and say on a date are things that I don't think they can hide. People can hide what they say about themselves and how they present themselves, but it is significantly harder for people to hide their reactions. So when you set a boundary or when you share a little bit about the trauma you've experienced or something more heavy, how they immediately react and respond, what's on their face and what comes out of their mouth, that says a lot about who they are. And so pay attention to those reactions even more than just sort of like their general, how they're presenting themselves. Okay, those are all of the questions for this week's episode. Thank you to everybody who wrote in. I really appreciate it. I love seeing your guys' questions. I love your episode ideas. Keep them coming. I said this in last week's episode, but just know that I see your emails. I have a big backlog of them right now. I'm trying to respond to everybody as best as I can. Thank you for your patience. I love when you guys write in because I feel like I'm getting to connect with you more. Like sometimes I just feel that I'm sending episodes out into the ether and that nobody's listening. So when I hear from you guys, it genuinely like makes my whole day. Like I have my email notifications set on specifically so that when somebody sends an email submission or anything like that, I get excited. I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you. If you would like to share your story with me, if you have an episode idea, if you have a question, the best way to send those to me is to go to my website at whattheydon'tsay.com and there's a little contact us page there. All of the links that I mentioned or resources and things like that will be linked in the show notes. I love you guys so much. Thank you for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your week. I'll catch you on the flip side, and cheers.